As excellent vehicles of rat transportation, naval travel knowledge is essential for any fledgling rat colony. Now you may be thinking to yourself, rat? In an open sea without any assistance, how is a rodent supposed to be able to build their own submersible? Well, they aren't. You build them on land. Or, at least in a place without water. Yes, I'm making a video entirely on Barotrauma Submarines, over-explaining the video game for the sole purpose of justifying what I'm about to say about the safety of individual submarines. First, we gotta answer a few baseline questions to give you some context before we begin, such as, rat. Why do we travel from the surface of Europa to its core? Or rat. Why are there guns on the sub bigger than the things we kill with them? Or rat. Why is my dead crewmate getting back up and hunting me? Sit down, get some paper, be prepared to learn nothing with me. In Barotrauma, you play as a sweaty crew member of a submarine deep within the crust sea of Europa. There's plentiful life in Europa, and its vibrant ecosystem led to research teams being sent to study the alien life. Just kidding, we were sent to harvest the resources again, classic human W. However, in the process of sending people on the new hunt for the watery valuables, Earth one day suddenly stopped responding to radio signals. The surface is getting irradiated through unknown means, forcing the people of Europa deeper into the core of the moon, in order to gain a foothold against increasingly dangerous and aggressive wildlife, all the while navigating the difficult environmental and political landscape just for a chance at survival. You play as one of the 6 roles in the game, all of which have never experienced what a toilet is, and by canon, poop in airlocks and pee all over their equipment. By rat standards, this is not simply abhorrent, but disgusting. Rats are clean beings. Of course, we'll start with the submarines, because they are the main feature of the game. You will be spending most of your time inside one of these things, and its surprisingly complex and detailed creation system. Now, to rate them based on their safety, I would need to give you a basic understanding of what each component does. So my mansplaining, manipulating, and manslaughtering ass will be doing all that as fast as I can. Docking hatches docks. Airlocks separate the inside from the outside. Armories get broken into. Navigation pilots the sub. Engines make sub go brrrr. Ballast makes sub go up and down. Storage never works the way you want it to. Machines do their thing, and a nuclear bomb. Now that you have a basic understanding of how the game and subs work, I'd like to go over them in terms of how safe it would be to work in one. Like, come on, some of these subs are strictly unsafe by OSHA standards, and while I think it's a horrible idea to incur the wrath of the guy in the hard hat, in the vast darkness of the European Sea, Earth cannot reach us, which means we are safe to commit as many ethical violations as possible, just like Amazon and Jersey. First off, we have the Barsuck. Let me make one thing clear, it is my beloved. A ramshackled mess of a sub that is much more prepared to deal with the local wildlife than some of the other more well-made subs in the game, especially in its own tier. But as a matter of safety, this sub's awful. Any submarine with glass would implode immediately upon shattering, throwing sharp glass shards inward towards potential crewmates. Not to mention, the sharp glass on the floor would make a walking hazard. The Barsuck also has a lot of boxes hanging around many commonly populated parts of the sub that are not secured in any way to the bottom of the sub, which can cause some issues related to head trauma. Now, similar to pools or other places that are commonly associated with water being in the floor, I will assume that proper yet reasonable precautions were taken to stop people from slipping into submarines. However, the large platform is an exception to this rule, due to its property of being able to be slipped off of via any sufficient amount of water. The sub also has a massive blind spot in the front of the exit, meaning that any unaware crew member heading out for any reason would be met with a potential opportunistic predator of the sea. That blind spot is also the only way in and out of the sub, meaning that if one thing goes wrong and a predator gets in, everyone is trapped in the sub, forced to fight any aliens. It also lacks any significant amount of engine power, and is very slow going up or down due to its lack of speed and its singular, large ballast, and a poor overworked pump. Even though there are places that are not regularly traveled to and are acceptable to only be lit with things like flashlights, there are 2 sections of the sub that are ill-lit, which is a direct violation of OSHA regulations. Supply cabinets containing life-saving oxygen masks, or medical supplies, are concentrated in the top right rooms of the sub, meaning that any engineers that frequent the reactors or other systems could find themselves stranded without these kinds of supplies in the case of an immediate emergency. Also, no beds. No beds, man. That sucks. Nowhere to sit, nowhere to goon. Come on! What's a rat gonna do with a good day's rest out here? In terms of what the Barsuck does right, the electricity system is well managed, the wires are easy to follow, and the power source has a system that allows people to know when the reactor is melting down and for the crew to avert a nuclear explosion. There is a button that allows depth charges to be fired from the launcher next to the loader. However, the system allows for the opportunity for misfires which can cause unnecessary harm or wasted things outside the sub. The electrical system is the best out of all the tier 1 subs, with a control system for the battery array in the case of the power going out. as well as an indicator for how filled up the system is. Oxygen across the board is average, the drainage is pretty decent but could use work. There's a sufficient amount of space in the sub for the crew to do their work. All relevant systems are easily accessible. There's even a break room in the sub, which is a good bonus and a sea isolated from the rest of civilized humanity. The bar suck has some glaring issues, which makes me hesitant to board it in the view of safety, but I love this thing to death. That's C tier for me. Dugongs are passive mammals, which are peaceful by nature and are typically found grazing seagrass and being huge, lovable pieces of blubber. Much like their real-world counterparts, the dugong in Barotrauma is also a peaceful, huge piece of blubber. I actually used it for my first sub, so I come from a place of integrity when I say this thing is awful, both to play in as well as to work in. From now on, unless something is egregiously bad or good about the sub, I won't mention it. That is because I want to share a story about the dugong, and in fact it was my first time ever playing Barotrauma. Me and my friends took this metal container and set off to the seas of Europa, because it looked like a normal submarine for a normal experience. Naturally, because the difficulty slider said normal, we started the game on difficulty 60. The engine power and system is a piece of crap. Half of the 8-man crew were busy trying to keep all the junction boxes in good condition and our equipment well maintained, while the rest of our crew were busy. Despite the potential threat of a cultist outbreak, we decided to push our sub as hard as possible to complete our objective, which was the delivery of some biologically questionable cargo. The sub, however, could not keep up with our democratic intention of delivering samples to the nearest lab, because a dugong with no upgrades has piss-poor electrical systems and engines. Now the dugong has what we would like to call difficulty defending from the sides in the top right, which can lead to quick flooding of the sub. Naturally, as first-timers, we went full speed ahead and ran out of power from our reactor, which couldn't keep up from the demand. We then hurtled toward the bottom of the sea. A horde of locals reminded us that we were still a bunch of mortals sitting inside of an iron core. Because we ran out of power, our guns couldn't keep up with the horde, and we were quickly boarded. With only one way in and out of the sub, we ended up being put in a difficult position of having to defend ourselves with nothing but a pistol and some tools. Surprisingly, no one was lost at the Great Sea, and we set off after burning most of our medical and personal safety supplies. Now there's always there's a saying in life that applies greatly to the situation. What was it? There's always a bigger fish. So naturally, we got attacked by giant jellyfish. Our weakened defenses couldn't keep up. We were locked in a singular airlock that was getting barred in by a giant jelly, and without ammunition for the guns, many of us died, either to shrapnel from the hull breaking, and us running out of medical supplies, or oxygen deprivation. The two survivors were holed up in the oxygen room, left to wait until the sub ran out of power, nearly the entire thing was destroyed, and the sonar to stop working. Then began the half-an-hour process of repairing the entire sub, bringing it to the station for our reward of, oh wow, that's not a lot. 0 out of 10, D for dugong. Orcas, much like their namesake, are more bark than bite. This does not mean that they are not bite. The orca has a huge blind spot below it and a smaller one above it with a glass roof. Granted, the glass roof is somewhere that not often traveled, but the point still remains that it exists and it is a massive hazard. The reactor can be kinda wonky, setting itself on fire sooner during a meltdown and also eating more of your fuel rods. Because the engine pushes the sub so hard, it can also have a hard time with braking and turning. However, there are two entrances, one of which you do have to wire yourself, but to be fair, if you have both a mechanical engineer and an electrical engineer on your crew, that's easily solved. The airlock does give you the opportunity to see what's going on outside, so you know exactly what you're getting into before you step out, which is the advantage of the window. The sub does flood, but most of the flooding is compartmentalized to the ballast tanks quite well. Unlike the previously discussed subs, there are fabricators and deconstructors on board which allow for the quick reprocessing of minerals and materials into more useful things, like medicines or ammunition. The 3 ballast tanks are amazing for quickly rising and lowering the sub, and its top speed is very high as well. But honestly, the biggest thing going for the sub is the beds. It is adequately equipped to deal with the denizens of Europa, the layout is amazing to avoid as much flooding as possible for the crew, and there's even a place to sleep. Clearly, a step up from the previous 2 subs, overall this sub belongs in the B tier. Camels, storage, bulky, big. Turns out the camel is actually an acronym for cargo and medical logistics. The 2 humps are actually storage units that, by lore, can be connected and disconnected to carry bigger things. But you can't do anything cool like that in game, it's just extra crate storage. That means you will be making fat stacks of cash if your sub can make it from one outpost to the next. The amount of blind spots on this thing makes crew on creature combat entirely mandatory, and you'll be spending a large amount of time simply repairing the damn thing. There is a great command station for the captain to always keep the crew up to date, and the weapons on the sub are quite powerful for this point of the game. However, the front ballast is simply inexcusable. There's a good and a bad to having a ballast tank this big. In the good, it makes the sub very stable. In the bad, it takes forever to go up and down. If a crew member gets stuck in this type of ballast tank, there's no telling what might happen to them. Some more unfortunate creature attacks can result in the ballast tank becoming easy access for water-based creatures, and can lead to a bit of a standoff at every level of the sub. There's a hazard sign next to the giant opening of the ballast, so we can get our first correct usage of hazard warnings as per OSHA regulations. Fabricators and deconstructors become somewhat standard here, and honestly there's even a room for some brevity on the sub, so there was some thought put into the quality of life for the crew. The crew quarters are well lived in. The medical quarter is expansive and well prepared to take care of patients, and generally the sub looks cozy, well maintained, and well decorated. My problem with the CAMO is not about the lifestyle you will lead inside of it, but rather with the fact that the CAMO suffers from several technical defects which hurt its survivability. For example, one's exit subs are not entirely a bad thing. For the CAMO, the only exit is located at the bottom, which can be used to deny enemies easy access to the sub in the case of the sub sinking due to flood. This would usually be good because this forces the enemy to dig through your hull, potentially putting them at risk of your ship's defenses. But the humps on the CAMO give the enemy a straight line to the sub that has no coverage from your defenses, which means you are entirely trapped in that case until you repair the whole sub, top to bottom. Let me explain to you my greatest frustration with the CAMO. Driving as a sub this big can feel clunky. Sometimes it is a struggle to dock something this large, and since it's not much of a fighter, you can end up in situations where you are meters away from safety and start sinking. It is an admittedly small thing, but with a turn speed and an ascending speed and descending speed, which makes the elderly look like Uma Musume, the issue is amplified on me. But admittedly, this looks like a solid sub to live on, just needs to work on the problems that of easily being seafood. B tier. Now, I'm not one for fetishizing steel tubes, however, this one's literally called the Humpback, so I think I get a pass on this one. A previous military vessel, it doesn't have any beds. The implication can be made that the crew doesn't rest, which lends the mind to a lack of care for quality of life. But the main draw of the sub is in its safety and security of the crew. Long considered the best sub in the game, it is one of the fastest, raises and lowers itself relatively fast, and externally has at least 2 layers of steel between the crew and the outside world. A lot of the sub's negatives can be managed by a smart crew. Its reactor is average, but running all the facilities on the sub will cause it to run into a power death spiral. Even with the battery array active, it cannot support everything at the same time, at least starting out. But life on the sub tends to happen in phases, which I will describe as calm, panic, and agony. During the calm phase, you can run your fabricators and deconstructors once your battery and capacitors are at full charge. In the panic phase, turn off the fabricators and deconstructors on your sub so you can focus on giving as much power as it can to the guns. During agony, you turn on the backup battery array and start praying. This means that the power output of the reactor can be managed, much like a ship in Faster Than Light. The battery array room also sports a guitar, so some thought was put into how these people pass the time. Most of the ship seems pretty just god, we have a whole storage room, can we not just have free hanging boxes and stuff? Yeah, it's just out in... The sub also has an interesting amenity for more exotic crew members looking to cosplay as the walls. The med bay has an incredible amount of space, but no bed, so if you're hurt, you gotta lay on the floor. The ballasts are not similar in shape. I'm guessing one to help aid the other make quick movements, and the other to help with a faster sinking speed. For a military vessel, this is quite solid, in terms of being able to live here and fighting. That's the main thing with this sub. You won't often run into dangers your crew will not be able to fight. Its only 2 blind spots are either the engine, which would chew flesh into, like, paste, or the front, which has a lot of armor. S tier. It could use with some beds, but there's definitely some ways to distract yourself from the horrors of the sea, and there's a lot of guns to protect you from the horrors of the sea. 1 orca would be enough already, but I think 2 orcas would be gluttony. Bitches really be like, I got 1 dog, but I think I need another. The Orca 2 is a much improved sub, with its bottom blind spot not only being lessened, but overall the bottom being covered in a significantly bigger gun. The glass roof removed in favor for actual useful hull, the ballast tanks have been upgraded, and the bottom airlock has actually been pre-configured, which is nice. It still keeps all the things that make it good too, such as its top speed, its ability to rise and sink quickly, as well as its fabricator systems, with its flood control. But it still has its previous issues such as the fuel consumption, lack of beds, and pushing the sub to a hard one direction making it harder to break. For the most part, it's a huge upgrade, bit expensive to maintain and use, with the whole fuel cell thing, but it's an extremely good sub for tier 2 and certainly competes with its competition. A tier sub. The Azimuth wins out on being the best sub for anyone with a gag and some loot. First, we need to talk about its standout feature, the silent running mode. All it does on this sub is reduce the engine speed to 20% of its value, which actually does work. There are many different ways you can make the silent running work better, such as turning off the oxygen generator and using your battery array rather than the reactor. At the end of the day, that's up for the crew to decide how to best make use of the feature. But life on the sub seems rough, and my justification for this is the lack of any medical fabricator, as well as any sort of recreational facility. That's right. No piss, no bed, no wank. Your life on the sub is all work, and that's without taking the whole silent running thing into account. Like, you could be in a situation where the only air you get to breathe is through a mask, and you're shitting yourself because your slightly psychotic captain is using the silent running tech to tickle a Moloch's balls. It does have top tier mobility and very decent weaponry, but like, come on now. C tier. No wank. The Typhoon is what you get when you say fuck it. How many big guns can I put on a sub? Look, I can't defend the look of this thing, but what I can defend is the life on it. It is our first sub with a fully stocked and functional recreational room. It's got beds, it's got a heater. I am slightly confused on how you managed to get breaking news on the monitor. Each room is now individually compartmentalized, which helps stall enemies and give the security team time to deal with internal threats. This also means that flooding is the primary concern that makes this thing undesirable. Speaking of internal enemies, sometimes places will task you with the transport of criminals. Your definition may differ. This sub has a jail so you can separate the unwashed masses from your illustrious crew. The blind spots on the sub are notable because they aren't exactly weak points. The front of the sub is just a massive piece of armor, so enemies are unlikely to breach it. And there's nothing too important that would instantly flood from a breach. The back houses the engine, chopping flesh to paste. Now the top of the sub is actually a bad blind spot, and easy to breach, but you would also need to get past a goddamn railgun in order to get to a pretty isolated room. Everyone has a place in the sub, but the main reason why I'm putting it in S tier is that it has all the benefits of a nice life and 2 big fucking guns. So even if your sub takes a bit more fuel, the ballast and engines are crap, and you're going to end up fighting everything you run into, you're well equipped for these encounters. Ever wanted to somehow pincer something in the submarine? You have Blahaj. The sub is more bent than a dude that constantly has to hide his boner in tight pants and underwear. And fittingly, it might actually be one of the worst subs I've ever fucking seen. Like, it's got no battery, so when the reactor stops outputting energy, that's it, you're dead. And inevitably, your engineer will forget about the reactor. There's no facility here for quality of life or passing the time, not even a guitar. Let's get into the main feature of any attack sub, the absurdly large gunnery compartments. My main praise, as also my main gripe, is that the railgun loader is next to a fabricator so you can constantly load it, but that made the ship designer feel like they can store rails on the other side of the room, which is unforgivable. My other problem with the gunnery compartment is that if you get knocked down from the top floor, you can fall all the way to the bottom because of the platform that's in between the top and the bottom, which means that the entire time that you are falling, climbing back up and getting back to the periscopes, your sub could be under heavy fire. When you fall, you could get a concussion, or you could just like fall to your death. Falls on the #1 killer in workplaces, OSHA regulated, so it's pretty bad. I do like having 2 engines. I think 2 engines is a good idea in case one fails for whatever reason, but you don't have a medical bay, so you don't have any medicine to treat the people who get hurt in the gunnery compartment anyways. Your entire life is fighting, and if your sub isn't fighting, it's doing nothing. The sub has really good coverage, but if an enemy gets close enough, they can hide where the guns can hit and tunnel their way in. C tier doesn't go into D on the pure merit that you're probably not going to die in it anytime soon, if your crew doesn't go crazy, and if your crew is trained. Look, I think the sub is cool, but the R29 is one I think I have to sell people to play. It relies on the top and bottom discharge coils, which means you're putting yourself in threat for things that have stun resistance if they get close. There's a blind spot at the top, which isn't as bad as it looks. More worryingly, there's glass in the command room, which causes some obvious glass-related issues and injuries. The front and bottom blind spots are very unforgivable, and the sub isn't heavily armed so it can struggle against the more pressing threats of Europa. Now aside from the threats on your life, how's that very precious thing doing inside the sub? Honestly, pretty well. The guitar makes a much needed return, the beds are here again, and there are rooms that exist just for chilling or to stare at the monitor for a bit, which is great for my tastes and it's a great break room. While the sub does come fully stocked with everything you would need, its balance are awful, but I can see this sub as an economic take for any crew. Like, it's not the best for fighting, but a couple of cargo missions and you can reasonably make back most of the cost of the sub, which is nuts, and then everything after that in the leftover you can use to buy a new one. It does have an individual room flood issue, but that's due to the layout of the sub. The flooding issue is very much mitigated by all the pumps around the sub, so smart redirecting of the water can drain this sub quite quickly. An A for me, the sub has everything you would ever want, but it is a bit risky considering how dangerous the seas are. If you get this vehicle, you will get rich in an astounding speed, so consider this the real-world equivalent of being an electrician in a remote location or, something like that. The Barilla is more accurately described as a colony rather than a submarine, not just in size, but also what it provides. The introduction for us to Tier 3 subs, and it is fittingly one of the biggest things in the damn game. Granted, it is a slow piece of crap, however, it is also a relatively well-defended piece of crap. Aside from the issue of the top and the bottom being vulnerable to enemies with stun resistance, it's actually a pretty decent sub externally. Internally is where I start to get excited. This thing has a disgusting amount of cargo, to the point where I think it's a bit wasted. If you're buying this as your endgame sub, then what are you going to do with all the money you make? Buy a different Tier 3 sub? One of the things I have done is make what I could conceive to be a very powerful sub, and it is reasonably priced. But like metagame waste aside, 2 engines, 4 ballasts, a fucking bar, break room with trophies, beds. It's amazing what you can do with money, honestly. Jesus. Each room is spacious and unlikely to deliver tripping hazards. Things are very clearly labeled and defined, and the flood resistance is amazing. I really like this sub. It also gets an S tier from me. Not much else to say, as long as you don't try to fight God with it, it'll serve you very well. Remora are great at going at great speeds and attaching to other sea life, which begs the question, which part of the sub is a Remora, and which part of the sub is actually useful? And a complete 180 from the Barilla, the Remora is probably my least liked sub by design alone. The other Tier 3 subs have Aura, which this thing is sorely missing. The Remora is also missing any sort of flood protection going into the ballast tank, of which is singular. Only having one big ballast tank is horrible for any sub, but this is supposed to be a scout sub. It's supposed to be meant for mobility. It's not, it's just ass. If a single enemy manages to sneak in between the 2 sections of the Remora, they are guaranteed to break into the main sub because there is physically no way they can leave otherwise. The engine room is what I consider to be a falling hazard, and there's not even a ladder, so going from one engine to the other is inconvenient. You have to go all the way back to the stairs in another room to climb right back up. There's no separation from the reactor to the rest of the sub, so I hope it never melts down or anything like that. Some rooms just straight up don't have any hatches or doors where it feels like it should have them, leading to less flood control and certainly less security internally. There is a lot of space for your own additions on this sub, but it feels completely empty. The massive tube below the sub is both a huge blind spot and a huge liability, which causes a lot of hassle when it comes to repairs. It at least has a bed and a jail before you die, but this is a C. Get it? Because it's a sub, because in the sea, the Remora's a fish in the sea. I'm very funny when I want to be. Apparently, someone was such a big fan of the Typhoon that they decided to create a sequel, and it indeed comes with a sequel worth of guns as well. The electrical discharge coil is put in a better spot because, put simply, gun. The sub has almost perfect coverage, but the front isn't covered except for gun. It's not a strict upgrade in terms of life, as you do lose the jail, but you get a very nice view of the outside. And this time, I get to assume that they've used something more sturdy than glass because, clearly, it's not crumbling from the pressure. Now, there are a lot of random rooms, and unlike the Barilla, you don't get a bar. Also, you don't get a guitar either, which is just a fucking crime, really. But you do still get beds, and there's some nice infrastructure. This is a sub for people who just want to fistfight God, but without all the other quality of life stuff, this does get knocked down to an A tier, especially since some of the shrapnel does become an issue later on. There's a new blind spot that didn't need to be there. Even if the guns got better and the internals didn't go up and down, I think it's an overall upgrade. Alright, so in terms of the difference between what I would live on and the gameplay, the Castrol is definitely up there as one of the greatest disparities. That's because if I wanted to play on the Castrol, I'd just play on my own ship, custom made with 17 different guns. The Castrol's amazing, but if I wanted to play an overpowered sub, I just play modded, because it's just that strong. Really good gun coverage, the only place that isn't directly covered is the one defended by 2 discharge coils for maximum shockage. I was going to say shockage, but I ended up saying something that can't be YouTube. The shape is my favorite out of all the subs in the game, plenty of ways in and out that are covered by guns, top and bottom hatches, a drone that has a use outside of offense, and the most aura possible. Internally, the sub is quite well compartmentalized, but there's where we run into an issue. The drainage of the sub will never leak into the ballast. What I mean by this is the entire bottom floor is either the manufactory or the gunnery, and both only have small pumps to drain the entire sub. This makes draining this sub a huge pain, but thankfully, the flood control is very good and the rooms are compartmentalized in a way that makes flood control easier. The internal ballasts are an interesting concept. They make it so that the minor leaks are not important, and you can move through as if nothing happened. This works well for the Castrol because how much more volume is taken up by the ballast tanks. This system is really good if you don't take up too much water. I don't think it's good in general, but I think you can make it work, and with a sub like this, It makes the drainage system better. It is not, however, difficult to flood a gunnery compartment, which leads to a logistical issue for the gun crew. Each room has a lot of additional reinforcement to supplement the sub's interesting layout, and there's even individual beds. The medical bay also has beds, but like there's no guitar. Again, where the fuck is my guitar? Labels are solid too, especially on the junction boxes, so you know what to repair first. The ballast tanks also give you a massive area to shoot in the case of the sub flooding, and the shooting floors are an essential part of this sub's personal defense. One big, and I do mean big problem I have, is the glass. Like, look, I get it looks cool for the person driving the sub, but like, one hit, and your very hard to sink sub is now driving unpiloted through the ocean waters. Like, at least when it floods and your captain has lost the waters, the flooding will be isolated there, but you, like, don't have a fucking pilot. Overall, the sub is very unique, I like its design, and it's carried many crew through the campaigns of the game. A tier, definitely worth a look for any crew looking to survive rather than thrive, but if you like fighting, this is your jam. 100% though, pilot as well, and everyone is making it alive. Winterhalter? I barely know her. I hate the sub. Like, okay, you got a research station. What good does that do for you without a dedicated medic? It does nothing. And outside of that, it's got a very undefended research station. Like, it looks like it was probably meant to be a scuttle at some point, but that idea was probably scrapped. In its place, you get one of the worst defended glass pieces of crap. It's got easy to breach ballast tanks, susceptible to being punctured, but they're also too bulky for a quick adjustment. A single puncture in any part of the sub would cause it to at the very least stop ascending, which is a massive problem because this sub cannot deal flooding very well. The storage doesn't do crap. The only and main reason you pick this sub is for the research station, but honestly, this has to be one of the worst subs in the history of the game. Its defense is entirely frontside, the back has 2 small guns to defend it, there's a chance that the entirety of your weapons used to defend yourself are pea shooters. Also, if you get one breach at the top of the sub, 50% of your sub just got breached and flooded. Thanks, this is a hazard with no easy way to defend. I don't count the railgun that could breach you itself. The whole sub is a cluttered mess. It's bad on its battle merit. I haven't even talked about the life merit. There's no beds, no recreational devices. I think the only thing that they do here is experiment. I don't want to be an experiment for some crazy scientist at the bottom of the goddamn ocean. That sounds like a horrible time. 0 out of 10, D tier, get it next to the Dugong and never let it see it in the light of day. There are a wealth of tubes in this game for rats to go inside of, but now we must talk about the main thing you play as, the rats themselves. Each class has its own talents, starting with general talents and then specializing into one of 3 skill trees. Once you finish going down a skill tree, you choose another. Every class also starts with different gear, but this hardly matters as you will be scrounging around for anything that can help you survive in this unforgiving frozen landscape. Your starting stats are also dependent on your class, and those heavily affect gameplay. The captain is typically located in or around the captain quarters, housing a navigation terminal used to pilot the submarine. If for any reason you manage to ram into either terrain or enemies, that's your crew's problem. It is the captain's privilege to use their best defensive tactic, the ramming maneuver. A captain is good at almost everything in the early game, but falls off as other classes get their own unique talents. For example, captains are the only class that can make normal revolver rounds, but these get replaced with depleted revolver rounds later on, which is then further replaced by a fucking laser gun. They also start with the highest helm skill, meaning they are the most skilled at piloting the submarine. Almost everything special to the captain, another class can do better later, but the thing that the captain can do best at is being a trophy. This isn't a joke. Staying alive and sitting in the sub all day provides your crew with substantial bonuses for the round. Actually, I lied. Captains are the best way to accelerate your economic success. They have an entire skill tree dedicated to money and experience, which your crew will appreciate. Conversely, if you want to pretend like you're in the Wild West, captains also have access to the big iron and the ability to shoot harder. Don't ask. Captains have it hard in the sea because they're always dealing with the assistants, or should I say the clowns. Everyone who has played the game for about 50 hours knows roughly what I'm talking about, but let me catch everyone up to speed. Assistants have aspects of all the other classes in their general talents, but add their own spice, which makes them that class, but better. Assistants are the most powerful class in the game, and already in their general talents, for example, they gain the ability to carry more items in containers and their own inventory than everyone else. Inventory management is important to the game, and completely gates many expeditions to taking more time, and therefore risking your crew and ship to more dangers in the open water. This gets better with specialized talents for the assistant, for they gain access to apprenticeships. This works by hijacking an entire class's other specialized talent, of which you can become the better version of that class. You can make better items, do the job better with higher stat lines, and the best of all, you can reach their keystone faster than the class you are imitating. Alternatively, if you're looking to be cannon fodder for your team, look no further than the Grey Shirts branch of the skill tree. At service level, it benefits and bonuses for being on the verge of dying, or well, just dying. But I guess the developers at Undertow ran out of ideas at the end because the capstone talent for this tree is growing pets. Not even a joke, it's pets. They're very cute and great at distracting unwelcome visitors. But now we talk about clowns. Have you ever wanted to be the single most important member of the squad? Have you ever wanted a fucked up power fantasy so bad you end up as a protagonist in some random isekai? Does the concept of running your body against an abyss creature until the frenzied actions that you call swings rend the creature's supposed neck from its head? Do you like honking? Perhaps pulling your horn out? Boy, do I have to sell for you. Clown power is so impactful it deserves its own segment, which it's getting here. Clown power at base grants you a very minute speed buff, as well as marginalized damage reduction in the water. This by itself is alright, but it forces you to wear a whole clown suit, which means no clothing buff and no mask for breathing, which is less than ideal. Immediately in the next talent, you get a clown diving mask, and you gain an additional 50% speed buff in the water with clown power. Already with these buffs, you're feeling pretty good about life. In the next part of the talent tree, you have two choices. One of these choices is a 50% chance to stun nearby creatures every time you honk, which is alright. Psycho Clown, however, asked the bold question of if having a clown from it would be a valuable party member. You melee faster the more insane you are, and you can get very insane. It is the single highest melee attack speed buff in the game to my knowledge, and it acts multiplicatively with the other buffs. I have a clown in my current playthrough, and I have not stopped turning my back to my homie. The capstone of the clown path is the ability to revive people who are unconscious if you hit them with a toy hammer, as well as gaining the ability to craft the Funbringer 3000, an absolutely worthless piece of gear if you ignore the fact that it still is power armor, which would turn most people into pure tanks to have worthless arms. It's still pretty bad. Speaking of pretty bad, would you like to do basically nothing for 4 biomes worth of playtime? Then the medic is for you. The medic works exactly the way you think it does, which means generally that the medic is doing everyone else's job, but worse. In some cases, people will even want you to not do their jobs for them so that they can do a better job at whatever you're selling. This is the actual assistant job in the game, as you will be playing the second fiddle for a grand majority of the game. Does your teammate sound like this? Bully them. They want you to heal them with bandages? Belittle them. They want you to hit them with morphine? Remind them of the pain that they inflict on you. Every time you are forced to play with this mentally deranged group of humans, if that's what they really are. Do they want you to give them antibiotics to save their lives from an infection? Show them that their actions are that of cancer, and you're only letting nature take its course. While you're playing everyone's bitch, you are also the only person that can properly use medical items. The class has a bit more of a learning curve than some of the other classes in the game, owing to the fact that overusing or underusing medical items can both end in disaster. For talents, you get a lot of health, or health manipulation, as well as money for going low on health, and a discount at the doctor's office, a foreign concept for Americans. Notably, I always take blood donor, because the 1 blood pack per mission becomes extremely valuable for a stockpile as the game goes by. In your specialist tree, you get 3 options to choose from, and there's a correct build path. You start with Medic, which is a solid boost to your early game and immediately useful at all stages of the game. Then go into Plague Doctor for the Advanced Syringe Gun and the Endocrine Booster, as you'll be able to gain access to these items at this point in the game. Endocrine Boosters are able to give you skills from other classes, which range from extremely useless to a 100% skill gain for the low price of 2 endgame ores, 2 items that you can only get from bats, and 1 endgame medicine. However, going to second gives you enough time to get to the point where you can use the Xenologist to its fullest extent. Gene harvesting is profitable. The reason why I say you should save the Xenologist class to the last is that, until now, your crew doesn't really give a shit about searching the corpses of enemies and have not let you do so, which means you wouldn't have a stockpile anyways. However, genes give you access to some of the genuinely most insane buffs in the game. No other class in the game can give you these kind of buffs. Innate health regen, damage reduction across the board, increased speed when you get hit, increased swimming speed, and don't touch the husk gene. That one might if you don't know what you're doing with that one, that might end poorly. The engineer is the Submarine's mother, and it shows in the talents in the form of lots of electrical repair buffs. You also get bonuses for repairing abandoned beacon stations and other miscellaneous oddities somewhat related to your job. This continues for your special talents as well, because who the hell uses crowbars for damage? Between physicist, electrician, and weapons engineer, you actually have a good spread of choices between which tree to start first. Physicists can help supplement the Tier 1 sub's terrible reactors, and eventually, the puck suit is incredibly valuable later on when your mechanic can actually make combat suits. Electrician is great for when you feel like your repairs are taking too long, and they also help your gunners shoot more things with the sub's gun. And the gimmick capstone looks weak for every Mud Raptor attack except 1. Weapons engineer is what you take when you want to kill things, but better. My advice is to stockpile deflated fuel for SNG mags because the crew will constantly need them. and the boost in firepower will be appreciated. And nukes. Yeah, nukes help. Yeah, nukes help a lot. With all the dangerous sea life in the game, you would expect there to be someone dedicated to committing as many school shootings as possible. Get it? Because a group of fish is called school? The comfort zone of any good security officer is in the safety of their sub, piloting a gun twice the size of them, laying waste to a group of unvaccinated people of life. Security officers get buffs and weapons in their talents, as well as bonuses for being the best war criminal the Geneva Convention could define. I don't really have a suggestion for this one. If you're playing Gunner, the talent tree will speak for itself, and you'll fit into each one of the three very well. You can't go wrong, just go and become the idol of death that all your ancestors were hoping you would become. For people wondering, Rat, why are you not elaborating? It's because the best way to learn about a security guard is to kill it yourself. Now let me try to sell you on the next class that I have intentionally saved for this moment. If the medic was the barracks bunny, then this is the barracks bull. This is the person who, per my experience, will put themselves at the greatest risk of requiring morphine. And since I'm usually the medic, I think I might know what I'm talking about. This sounds like the job for someone like the security guard, but in reality, the greatest tank in the Barotrauma crew list is the mechanic. Your job of tanking is so defined that a good portion of the talent tree is dedicated to eating as many hits as possible, with the other portion being entirely about keeping the sub as hole-free as possible, or making the machines work as well as they can. The specialist talents this time around are pretty unique and can be separated into the sub, the team, and the self. The scrapper can be used as a way to accelerate team growth with resources and tools, with the added bonus of giving the team a way of using those items. The mechanist gives the sub a better performance, better repairs, and even home defense. And finally, brawlers for when the mechanist needs to cosplay a gray shirt, except you never die. Of course, there's more to talk about, but we would be here for literal hours, and I kinda want to finish up so I can move on to furrier things. Barotrauma, a game about friendship, loyalty, and steel containers. And me personally, I'm not a fan of any of these things. I'm more interested in this is the wrong crowd. I'm in for a slippery slope.